So there's my drone as I showed it last. I had some extra stuff inside there. Maybe I did some ribs and stuff. And then this is what it's going to look like when it's rendered out. Oh, you're going slow today. All right, hold on. I'll just kind of speed it up a little bit. There we go. So it's gonna, the blades are gonna spin. The whole item's gonna kind of lift up off the ground. There we go. I don't know why it's going so slow today. You can see too on the blades that they're not just like a sharp blade. There's actually some blurriness to them. It's called motion blur. So an item that moves very quickly gives the appearance of it moving very quickly by having that motion blur attached to it. There we go. So now it's playing back in real time. Cool. All right, and then we'll also have like a still image of this too. So you're going to be turning in two things. You'll be turning in a movie, and then you'll be turning in a still. Now look here how I'm able to kind of come up with very quickly. This is like between these two iterations, it's probably like 15 minutes, okay, of time just kind of laying it out, and then choosing different colors and picking different stuff. So that's where we're going to be taking this. So the first step in doing this is we're going to be organizing all of our stuff, right? To animate anything, we need to have it organized. To texture stuff, we need to have it organized. This isn't, and this is typically my workflow when I'm working, is just kind of like, just build it. Just build all the stuff, and then after I'm done with that portion of it, I'll go through and just organize all those pieces, okay? So the first thing I want to do is grab stuff that's going to be animated. So looking at these propellers here, I know that this, that, and this are most likely all going to be animated together. Those are all pieces that will move and spin together. So I want to take all those pieces and group them together. And I'll call this propeller 2. Or just so I have to type it longer, I'll just type propeller 2. Now I called it propeller 2 because I want to kind of pick a direction. This is my battery pack, so I'm assuming the battery pack would kind of be at the back of it. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, like clockwise. That's just my method. As long as your stuff is labeled, you know what it is, it don't matter. I'm going to grab the rest of this, group that, call this prop 1, grab all this stuff, deselect the other stuff I don't want, group it, prop 3, grab all this stuff, deselect the stuff I don't want, group it, prop 4. Okay, so now those are the propellers. Now just to kind of test things out, make sure that everything is set up right, if I switch to my rotate tool, look at where it's rotating from. Right? Obviously my blade would not rotate from that specific spot. It should rotate from the center of this, right? That's where they spin around. So what I need to do is I need to center their pivot. So I'm going to go to either modify center pivot, or I'm going to go to one of my buttons here and use the center pivot command. And then I will be able to rotate around the center of that. Okay? And I always reset it back to the beginning, always back to zeros. Now with this blade here, if I select it, you'll see that it's actually like inside of a group. So here's my fan blade group, the one I use to kind of duplicate around. So it's inside a group, so I want to pull it out of the group. So I'm going to hold down Shift and hit P, and that pulls it out of the group. It unparents it from the group. So there he is. So I'm going to open up the other ones, grab that propeller 3, unparent it, and center pivot it. I'm going to go down to the other two groups, unparent those, center pivot those. Okay? So now at the bottom of this, I should have 4 propellers where if I grab all 4 of these and I just test out their rotation, they all rotate together. It's very important that this happens. If this doesn't happen, we need to fix it, because when we get to the animation part, it's hard to animate something if it's just not set up correctly. So these are the propellers here. Now inside the propellers I have different pieces that will obviously make it easier to work with. So here I have these blades that are inside this. P cube 3 and P cube 2 are just blades. So I want to rename these. Instead of going into each one of these and renaming it blade 1, blade 2, there's a tool up here at the top. So if you open up all of your buttons until you get to the one that looks like this, you can change this to the rename thing, and then I can just call this blade underscore 2 underscore, and you'll see how it renames it blade underscore 2 1, blade underscore 2 2. That way it just automatically renames these things pretty quickly for us. This part here is going to be the spinner for number 2. This one here is going to be the nut for number 2.
You want us to rename every...
We don't have to rename every part. Every part that's going to be a different surface. Okay? So you'll see how some of these I don't do that to. So I'm going to open up prop 1 and do the same exact thing. Grab the cubes. Blade underscore 1 underscore, and it renames them. This is the spinner for 1. This is the nut for 1. I'll go to prop 3. Blade underscore 3 underscore there. And this is the spinner for 3. And this is the nut for 3. Now the main reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to be giving them their own textures. Like this part here is going to get a different texture than the blades, and the nut is going to get a different texture also. So I want to make sure they're named so I know as I'm assigning materials, I'm putting it on the right objects. Okay. Where am I at? Blade underscore 4 underscore there. This will be spinner 4. And this will be nut 4. Okay. And I'm just collapsing those. There we go. Okay. So now here's my antenna, so I want to name that. I have some random groups here. Okay, now here's where I wouldn't name stuff. So these are my ribs. All of these ribs are basically just like pieces of plastic or whatever. Like thinking about how I'm going to texture these things, I may take each one of these pieces here and color them a different color. That way I have the color of the plastic here, and then I have this other contrasting color on top of it. Okay, so that's my thought process in doing that. Same thing here. I have the plastic of my ship, and then I have this other material that would be, right, just an accent piece. So if I grab all of these, and I have 4 groups, there we go, what I'm going to do is just group them all together and just call this ribs. I don't have to go into each one. They're all getting the same material. There's no animation to them. Doesn't matter. Okay. Copy drone is a backup copy that I made, so I'm going to delete the layer. I'm going to delete the backup drone. Don't need him anymore. This is the motor, so I need that. So I'm just going to unparent it so it's separate and call this motor. And this is why it's nice to have a system, and this will be motor 2. Go. And then fan blade, I'll unparent that, and I'll call this fan blade 2. And then I'll just delete these empty groups. So I'm just going to unparent these, delete the group, and then label these accordingly. So this is motor 1, fan blade 1. Okay, this part here, this is going to be my battery door hinge. This is going to be my, battery door hinge pin. And this is my bat door hinge. And that's my battery door. And then those are my legs. Group 2 is nothing. Okay, so when you select a group and nothing is visible but something turns pink, that means that that group was somehow connected to another object. Okay, when we created it, we may have extruded or duplicated or whatever. It creates these like random groups. So if I go to delete all my history, we'll see that that group goes away, and this is no longer turning pink when I select anything. So let's go here and rename this. This is motor for 3. This is a fan blade for 3. I'll unparent these two, delete that group. I'll unparent these two, delete the group. This is the body, so I'll unparent that. Okay. Fan blade for 4. Engine, oops, motor. And then this is body. Okay. So let me go ahead and I'm going to save the scene as. Alright, so that's organized. Now what I want to do next, after I've gone through and kind of renamed all those things, I want to start grabbing stuff that is going to be, now that we've done the animation stuff, grabbing stuff that's going to be part of the same coloring, okay? So like on mine, this body is going to be all one color, okay? So I'm not going to change the color of the body in different parts. The door hinge, the battery door itself, the legs, all of that will be the same color, okay? So if I grab the body, probably these fan blades too, I'll grab those. Propellers are good. Door hinge, battery door, and legs. Okay, so this is all the stuff that I think I'm going to color the same thing. If I decide later I want to change it, I can change it, but just for organizing now, I'm just going to group it and call it the main plastic. Okay, that's good. There's all my motors. I can just group those together and just make a motors group, just to kind of keep things organized again. I don't want to group my propellers inside of a propeller group. Maybe I do, just to keep it organized. I just have to be careful I animate the propellers inside the group, not the actual group. So I don't want to animate this. That's not what I do. I would open this up and grab the individual pieces and animate the individual pieces. Okay, so that should be good.
Now, when you animate those, are you going to want to animate them like all starting at the same position, or should they?
I can vary that later too, so I'm not even concerned about that at this point. All right. Now I need to grab everything and group everything together and just call this drone. Okay. So as the thing is lifting up off the ground, I need to have one item I can grab that would do that. And so I just group everything. Now I can grab drone, and I can move him up off the ground. I can give him a little bit of rockiness and whatever. All right. Cool. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to texture our stuff. We're going to be using a different program to do the final texturing, okay? So you could use Maya if you want to. If you're at home, you don't have this other program, you could download a trial of it if you wanted to. But if you just wanted to do the Maya one, just do the same lighting and texturing we did on the past assignment on the product, okay? So you put a white backdrop, you put some area lights in, and you just texture it using Mila's. Perfectly acceptable, okay? With this though, we need to kind of set this up so that regardless of which method you choose, we have to put some labels on this because it looks kind of plain, especially when we have it like that. So what I want to do is add a little label to this that would say the name of the ship, whatever. Maybe I have some lights on it. Maybe I have some decals. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go to Photoshop and make a brand new document. And this is kind of backwards from how we did the last assignment. The last assignment we laid out the UVs. We brought it into Photoshop, painted on top of it. We don't need to do that, okay? In some cases, you don't need to do that. The product one, yeah, we need to know how big it is and how round it is and everything before we create the label, but for this case, we don't. So I'm going to make a document that's 4096 pixels by 4096. This is a good resolution to keep detail for what we're going to be creating. And we're only going to create one texture really, so it's not going to be anything insane. Now, what goes on here? Any textures you want to put onto your guy, they would go on here. Okay, so I know I want to put my name of the ship on there, so I'm just going to call it Sarcona. So I'm just going to go with my text tool. I'm going to write Sarcona. Ugh, that one. Yeah. That was a kind of neat one. We'll just go with something like that. Sarcona. Shrinking it down, shrinking it down. There we go. All right, and it's lower caps, which is kind of neat. Maybe I'll put a box around it too. That might be kind of interesting to see. So I'll just make a new layer, fill it. Shrink that down, delete. There we go. Cool. Let's give this a color. Control click it first, and I'll pick a color like that. And then I'll do the same thing on my text, just kind of pick that same color. There we go. Okay. So now I want you to think of this square that we have here as kind of like a decal sheet. You ever had those like cars you'd buy at the store? You assemble the cars, and you get all these like little stickers you peel off, and you stick them all over. That's what we're creating. So anywhere we would want a Sarcona sticker, I have a Sarcona sticker right there, and I can reuse that sticker over and over again. So if I wanted anything else on here, I could put that in here. So if I wanted to create some kind of neat graphic, I'll just make this. I'll fill that in. Transform it down. Delete it. Transform it down again. Fill it. Transform selection. I hate that there's no hotkey for that I know of. And then transform selection. Control T is to shrink the actual item down, not the selection. So if I hit Control T, it grabs this entire thing, and I can scale it down, but not the selection. I could probably make one, but no patience. All right. So let's recolor this. What's that? I don't know. All right, so that's cool. So something like this. And then the background color, this is going to be whatever color our entire body is going to be. We want the body red or blue or green or whatever. That's the color we would choose on there. So for this, let me pick this color. So it's kind of like a cream. Yeah, you can see. It's really cream up here. It's not as cream on the screen. So just trust me on that one. That's cool. All right. So let's save this as. I'm going to put it into my source images folder. Drone, source images, and I'm going to call this label sheet. And you save it as either a Targa or a TIFF. Those are the two formats that the program will accept. So I'm just going to save it as a TIFF. I typically use TIFFs. All right, so leave that open so we can play with it. So now what I'm going to do is go into my white group, my main plastic body group. There we go. And I'm going to assign a material. Now, because I'm going into a different program, it doesn't matter what material I assign to this. I just need something so that I can use that to line things up. So I'm going to go to Surface Shader, perfect. Click on my color, click on File, click on Folder, and then grab that label sheet. Yeah, it should be good. Okay, so now if I save, and then we hit 6, what we're going to see is that my label gets put on there. Now, because I've done no UV layout for this, it's just random. It's just like wherever it felt like putting it. So you can see how there's some lines here, there's some lines there. And if I sneak around to certain areas, you can kind of see some of this yellow line in some of these spots. Okay? So now let's get rid of the yellow and the stuff where we don't want it. So if I just grab that main plastic body like this, and I go to the UV texture editor, here's all the UVs for it. I actually have to grab the pieces, I guess, in order to see the texture. There we go. So you can see how some of these pieces are overlapping it. None of them are laid out. That's fine. I don't care about it. All I need to do is take all these UVs, squish them down, and throw them into a blank area so there's nothing there. So I'm just going to go to right-click and go to Shell, grab all of it, and then just shrink it down. It's going to go slow. There we go. And then move it over to the corner. Okay, and I move it to the corner in case I decide later I want to add something else to the scene. Alright, so now that's over in the corner. So now what we should get is this is perfectly cream, and it looks perfectly cream. There's no other colors anywhere else on it. So now I want to put my decals on. So to put my decals on, I need to select the faces I want the decal to go onto, and then project the texture onto it. And then it's simply a matter of moving it around. So if I go to face mode, and I say this is where I want that texture to go, right here, okay? Even if it's a small area like right inside here, I would still grab a bigger area so I have more choice, more ability to kind of customize where it's going. So I go to UV, I go to planar mapping option box, and I want to look at, let me scoot this stuff aside, the direction. So the X direction is the one that, pulling out that way. So I want to choose the X direction. I'm also choosing bounding box, and everything else should be good. Project. Okay. So now what it does is it takes that shape, and if I go to my UV texture editor, and I'm going to go to dim the image so we can see it, you can see how we have now that shape. So all I have to do is just move this shape here. There we go. Scale it up a little bit. And now you can see there is my texture right there. Okay. Now we are getting some clipping or some popping in of that texture on the sides. This texture is basically like looping. Okay, so it's like duplicating itself. This texture is like right here and right here. So this is just kind of like showing some of those sides where it's repeating. Because these are not anywhere special, I can just grab this and just scoot it over. Okay. If I grab this, scoot that over, and now I don't have those things showing up on the sides. All right. Or I could have gone into Photoshop, shrunk the texture down maybe, and just scooted over to more towards the middle. That would have been acceptable also. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to go here and grab the same set of faces. I'm going to go to UV. I'm going to go to planar mapping, project it in the X direction. Just move this basically on top of it, and then I can scale it up to fit. Now, just like before, I'm going to scale up the height in the middle because I moved the edges. So I'm just going to get as big as I can in the middle. Okay. Then I'm just going to grab the sides of it because it's still going to do that same thing of these poking through. And there we go. Perfect, right? Let's go backwards. Right. So what we have to do is I'm going to grab the shell from here, and there's these little flippers. So flip it horizontally, flip it vertically, whatever. One click, done. I can adjust it, move it over left and right if I needed to, if I want to center it or whatever. There we go. Okay. So that's how I get that texture onto that side and that side. Cool. Now let's say that I wanted to put something else on here. So I'm going to grab, let's say, the battery pack. Now I'm going to put that little circle, those 3 circles I created right here on the battery pack. Do the same thing. Planar map it. This is the Z direction. That's the direction that that face is facing. I project. Now I don't even have to go to the UV texture editor for this. I can do it all right here. I just scale this up and move this over. You can see how I'm just kind of shrinking it down to get that to fit. Now if I said, you know what, I want that to go maybe another face out, well, grab all the faces and then just reproject it. Try not to be afraid of the tools. They're just tools.
How do you know what Z is?
You can look down here and see the Z. Also, Z is always blue. So red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. There we go. So now we got a little bullseye type thing right there. Okay. And if at some point I'm like, ooh, that's kind of like low resolution, low quality, low, I want something fancier. all I have to do is go back to Photoshop, fancy it up. Those changes will trickle right back in. As long as I painted it in this exact spot, that will change the entire thing, right? Same thing with my name. I know that the square is like perfectly where I want it. I can put whatever I want in that square, and it'll change when I go into my other program. All right, cool. So that's that. All right, so the next thing I need to do is I need to assign materials to all of my objects, okay? So I'm going to grab them in a specific way of how they're going to be textured. So I already grabbed the main white part or the main beige part and assign those. So I'm just going to assign random materials to all the other pieces. So I'm going to make that red. And it doesn't matter what I assign them, they just have to have something on them. And I'll make that green. I'm not even labeling what this is because it doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if I pick a different color either. I could pick the same color. I just think it looks neat when you pick different colors. And I'm just hitting G to redo that command. I assigned a material, hit G, it assigns a new material every time. Click this, hit G, assigns a new material. Then I can pick a different color. Grab my ribs, hit the up arrow, assign a new material. Blue. Oops, I didn't grab all of them. Now in this case, I'm going to go to assign existing and just assign that last one that I put in there. Alright, so I think that's it. Alright, blades, I have that, I have that. Okay, so those are all the items that will get different materials once we get into this other program. So I'm going to save this as, again, it's always important to kind of save these things, 04 textured. There we go. Okay, so now this other program is called KeyShot. And what KeyShot allows us to do is take our entire model and bring it into the other program. Now we can do animation inside of KeyShot, but it's actually kind of like clunky as to how it does that. Set this off to the side. Okay, so we can bring our piece of geometry in here, but first I want to do my animation on it, then bring that in. So I'm going to go into here, and I'm not going to do all the animation. I only want to do the main drone animation. And I'm just going to set some keys on this, just kind of lifting off. That's all I want to do. Our animation is going to be 120 frames. Just because of the time it's going to take to render this out, we don't want to take up too much time doing that. So I'm assuming, kind of planning this out, the blades are going to be stationary, then they're going to start spinning, and then as they start spinning, it's going to gradually lift up off the ground. Okay, not just go whoop, it's going to go like kind of warbly up. So around 60, that's when I'm assuming that the movement of it is going to start moving up. So I'm going to grab my drone group and just hit S to set a key on everything. So I have a keyframe right there. Then I'm going to go to 120 and just kind of pull it up a little bit. Okay? So this is what we don't want, is just that. It's too clean, right? We want it to look a little bit more like there's wind that's pushing it up. So I'm just going to go up like 20 frames or so, give it a little rotation, S to set another key. Go to 100, rotate it around the other way, S to set another key. So now if we watch it, okay, so now we're getting this kind of movement. We can go back and set other keys too, like if we really wanted to just kind of distort this a bit further. You just don't want to go too far because otherwise it's going to look like it's doing that. Okay? Now here it does look like it's kind of jittery still, like I want it to be a bit smoother into all these transitions. What's happening is it's going from keyframe to keyframe to keyframe to keyframe, and it's basically like stopping at each keyframe. Okay, that's why we get this motion of it looking like it's kind of stopping at each one. So I'm going to go to Window, Animation Editor's Graph Editor, and inside here these are all the graphs. So if you've used graph editors before in After Effects, they're different. Okay. These ones are much better once you get used to them. So one of the neat things, I can click on one graph, hit F, and then I can see what that one graph is doing. Translate X isn't doing anything, so I don't need to touch it. Translate Y is my big one. That is doing something. Now look at the movement of this. It's pretty steady. Okay, so it looks like it's a nice smooth transition happening there. What we wouldn't want is something like this. That means it's going to basically go like this, okay, and like speed up and stop every time we hit a keyframe. So I'm just going to set that back to the default. Let's go to translate Z. That's not doing anything. Rotate X. Okay. Now this one is doing something, and if you look, there are some spots where where it's speeding up right here at the beginning, and then right here it's going to start to slow down, and then right here is basically stopping that rotation. It's kind of stopping here, kind of stopping there, and kind of stopping there. So that's probably going to be the same thing on rotate Y. Kind of stopping here, kind of stopping, and then probably the same thing on rotate Z. Okay. So what I can do to kind of correct this is just make these a little bit more enhanced, right? So it's kind of a little bit more drastic in how this is moving. Just grabbing this, dragging on that, and then middle mouse button. It's kind of finicky, right? So if I click and drag here, and then I try clicking and dragging here, sometimes it doesn't select it, sometimes it selects something else. So I just left drag, and then middle mouse button drag to move it. All right. So that's one thing I could do to kind of adjust some of these, is just kind of accentuating some of these curves a bit more, like that. And that'll help kind of smooth some stuff out. There we go. So this is going to dip down and come up instead of just kind of plateauing in there. I don't want to really touch the front and the back of this because that's going to be where they're kind of softening up. Yes, sir.
Can you edit these while the animation is going? Can you like watch it?
No, it's too subtle to see. I mean, you could, but you're not going to see it. Right. So typically you would just kind of play with it here and then do that. The other thing I like to do is if we look at all three of these, you can see how all three of these are exactly lined up together. So every time it moves, it's going to move all in one direction and then kind of stop, and then move in another direction and kind of stop. So the other thing I can do is grab one of these keyframes, hold shift, and then middle drag to the right or left. And what this does is it offsets all these rotations. So instead of them being right on top of each other, they're going to rotate kind of more randomly, which is what it should be doing. So I'm just going to kind of pull these this way, pull these that way. There we go. That way. All right, so let's see what that looks like. Just doing that one thing of adjusting the curves there. There we go. So that feels a little bit more natural because everything's overlapping. We're not getting this move here, then move here, then move there. It could still be smoothed out a little bit. I think this keyframe, I could probably just delete that. Maybe I'll move this up a little bit more. There we go. The best thing, just try it. See if it works. You don't like it, undo it. Yeah, it's all right. It's good enough for now. Okay. So that animation, perfect. I'm going to take this into KeyShot now. I'm going to export all of my stuff. So I'm going to call this drone export 1B. You guys are 1B. I need to make sure that this is an FBX. So I'm choosing FBX from this drop-down list. I'm going to make sure that my animation is on. And I'm going to say bake the animation. What baking does is it goes from frame 1 to frame, in this case, 120. There we go. And it's going to lock in a keyframe. So it's going to basically set a keyframe for every single frame. That way when it gets in a KeyShot, it doesn't have to guess what it's doing between frames. It just knows because it's locked into it. So we're going to set that from 1 to 120. I'm going to scroll down to where it says FBX format under the advanced options. And I'm going to set this to FBX 2014-15. There's some sort of issue with 2016 FBX that doesn't allow you to do this, okay? So, drone export, that's it. Unsupported shaders, I don't care. And now we go back to KeyShot. Okay, so now here's KeyShot. Oops. I'm going to save this real quick. So I'm going to go and import my model. Now, I want you to see what happens when I import the model. I still have to do one more thing before I export it from Maya. So some things I always do, always keep original on anything. So I open up each one, keep original, export or import all that, sure. Alright, so there's my drone. And you see how it came in with the textures from the other software. Now look at the blades that are on here. You see how my blades are not smooth anymore. Now they're crisp and edgy, right? So when I have in Maya the 3 button clicked, it looks like that. When I have the 1 button clicked, it looks like that. That difference does not translate into KeyShot, okay? So any item that I actually want smooth, like 3, I have to smooth it out inside of Maya and then bring that in. So I'm going to, I'm going to grab all of my items here and hit 1 on them. Okay? And then anything that I want smooth, I'm going to make sure that I click on it and smooth it out for real. So I already know in this case what I want to smooth and what I don't. This is actually easier if I do this. And then I don't select these, because I don't want those smoothed out, because I need to add another bevel if I wanted it, just because the corners look weird. I go to mesh, I go to smooth, I say 2 divisions, smooth. So now this is going to go through and actually smooth all of my stuff. So instead of having it hit 3 to see it smooth, it'll just default be smooth. Now after I do that, I definitely want to save another copy of this. I don't want to bring this or save this as my final version in case I ever need to go back and do something else. If I decide, oh, I want to change the texture location, I want to put a texture here or there or wherever, you'd have to reselect all these faces. Every time you smooth, it quadruples the number of faces, okay? So this face here will be cut up 4 times. I did 2 iterations, so now you take all 4 of those faces and you cut those up 4 times, and now you have 16 times the faces, okay? And you can see how long this is taking just smoothing out these couple pieces. But once we get into KeyShot, obviously it'll look a lot nicer. Now in KeyShot, I'm just going to go to New, just to discard that. There we go. And one of the nice things about KeyShot is that you'll see it's like drag and drop. It's ridiculously how easy it is. Just drag and drop. I want rubber, there it is. I want metal, I want plastic, there it is. All your lighting is essentially done for you, so you don't have to do any lighting in the scene. You can do some additional lighting if you want to, but you don't have to. Is that done? That's still going. Another program that's very, very similar to KeyShot is one called VRed, and it's another one by Autodesk, so you can download a 3-year license of it. KeyShot is typically used by companies like Ringside, Creative. Any place that's using 3D commercially would use KeyShot just because it's pretty cheap.
How much does it cost?
KeyShot is only a couple hundred, like I think 400, not too bad. VRed is used by GM, Chrysler, Ford. This software is $25,000 a license.
Do they use it like mostly with AutoCAD then?
With just car data, right? So any product you have, they would just bring in that car just like we're doing, and they could texture all the pieces to it. So they want the steering wheel, drop that material on. They want glass, drop that material on. So this one has more bells and whistles for $25,000. It's free. If you wanted to work in automotive, I would definitely download the software and play with it. Okay, you'll see how very similar these 2 programs are, and you'll also see kind of how limited KeyShot is. There we go. So now we're all smoothed out. Now I'm going to go and export all this out again. My settings should still be there, so I can just hit that and this, and yes. It's going to give me the same error about Surface Shader. I don't care about it. And then back to here. Now that FBX format is also for like video games. So if you wanted to model something and bring it into a video game, you could export it as an FBX, and that model would then go into any one of your engines, Unreal, Unity, whatever. So now I'm going to import my model, Drone 1B. Same thing, keep original, keep original. My Y is up. Some softwares the Z is up. Your controls in here are very similar to Maya's. I have to reacquaint myself because every time I get into a new software, I forget what the hotkeys are. I'm pretty sure it's just like Maya's. It's still loading. Because we have our more stuff in there, it's going to take a little bit longer. There we go. Okay, so alt left mouse button is that, right mouse button is that, middle is that. Yes, so exactly like Maya's hotkeys. All right, so now let's go in here and say we want these engines to be a different color. Let's say I want the engines to be made of some sort of brushed metal. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to any one of these things. These materials over here on the left are all your materials. So instead of Mila and Fong and Blinn and all that, you just pick exactly what you want. So you're like, okay, I want that to be metal. So I'm going to go to metal, and here's a bunch of different kinds of metal. Here's a preview of each one. There's brass, there's chrome. Let's say I want this black chrome on here, okay? So I'm going to drag the black chrome onto that piece. So I just pick it up and drag it. Now watch what happens. See how it assigns it to not only that one, but all of the other ones that are inside there too. Because they all have the same material, they all go together. Now I want these to be, let's say, chrome. So I just drag this and drag chrome on there. There we go. Okay? And the lighting's there. Now you do kind of see too, as I start moving stuff around, everything gets really grainy, and then as it sits there for a second, it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. So what this is doing is it's rendering as we go, okay? So every time I do this, it's not rendering it, or it's trying to render it, and then when I let go of it, it's actually like rendering it out, okay? So it's a neat way that it'll do that. And literally all the stuff, like whatever, like brass. What does brass look like? Yeah, I don't like that, or I do like it. What does this one look like? Ooh, look at that. There we go. The rapper's drone. Very reflective. Now some of these have textures on them. So you'll see like this has some stuff, and there's some little like gash marks or whatever in those. Those need UVs laid out. If we don't have UVs, we can't use those textures. They'll just look funky on there. So for the most part on this assignment, you wouldn't need to use something like that. So you can kind of stick with, I don't want that, the basics. So let me go through and assign some of these things. So like glossy paint, I'm going to go with this blue, assign it to the blades. That's kind of cool. I'll do a glossy blue for the things here.
Can you like customize the colors like deeper?
Yes, we'll get into that after, or in a second. This will be orange. There we go. Cool. I'm going to go to plastic, hard plastic. Soft. There it is. And that's going to be for the antenna. Alright. And then I have to do the ribs down here. I'll just put that same rubber on those ribs. Alright. And then let me get a different plastic on this outer shell here. Shiny, beige. Doesn't matter the color because we're going to change it. Okay, so there's my basic default. Now, like you said, what if we want to change one of the colors? I like that material, but I just want a different blue or whatever. Double click on anything. That will bring up your materials. Now mine would come up on the right side, but I have to pull it off because of the screen resolution I'm at. So you can pull off all of these things so they can float, and that way you can move them around wherever you need to, okay? So you typically have, let me put these back, the library right there on the top left, see where it says library, and then you have project. So these are all the ones that are available for you to tweak or for you to add to your scene. The ones that are in project are the ones that are currently loaded. So if I go to the materials tab, here's all the materials in my scene. There's the one I have selected, so then I can click on the color and choose whatever color I want. Now for this, we had that material, we had that texture we wanted to load in there. So I'm going to go to the Textures tab and click on the little check mark here. That'll say, where's your texture? I'll say, there it is. And then it'll load that texture right inside there. Now, it doesn't know that we laid out UVs, okay? Some parts, like something from AutoCAD or CATIA, they don't lay out UVs in those programs because they're just kind of automatically set up. So how it comes in is going to be different. So I'm going to go down here to where it says Type, and just choose that I have UVs. Not that funny. that will then register my UVs that I've set up in the other program. Now the other thing I have to make sure is unchecked is this DPI. If I have this checked, it won't lay it out correctly, so I need to uncheck it so it does lay it out correctly. So there we go. So now we can go through and customize anything we want to customize. I can go back to this chrome black, that's for the motors here. I can change this from being a metal to being a liquid. I don't know why I do that, but maybe it looks cooler, right? It doesn't mean it's going to be soft or liquidy, it's just a liquid material on there. So you can play with different settings there. Maybe it's velvet. Doesn't look very good. Maybe it's X-ray. Maybe it's a wireframe. Okay, so you have a lot of different options for ways that you could show these things off. Yeah, that one has a gem, doesn't look very gemmy. I'm going to change it to glass, it'll look better. It's gone. There we go. Cool. Alright, back to metal. And I think I'm going to take this too, double click that, and instead of this being plastic, I'm going to make this metallic paint. And you can see you'll get different highlights from it. You'll get different reflections from each one of these. I can blend this material with the color too, so if I still want to keep my labels, but blend it with this color, I can do that as well.
So if you do like half of them in Maya and you just leave the textures as is, they'll render out as you had it in Maya?
Well, they're going to render out as like, if you, like the ones I originally brought in, yeah, it'll just kind of render off this like weird texture because they're not these materials here.
So you have to reassign them all?
Yeah. Because they want these ones because these ones are how theirs are set up. Yeah, so it's not, I don't want this pink on here, but that's something better. Okay. So we're going to pretend that that's where we want that to be. Now I want to set up my animation. So my buttons for animation are down here on the bottom. So I'm going to go to the animation. That pulls up this timeline. That way we can see it because I have it right there. So I'm going to go to the Scene tab here and open up my drone. Open up the drone. Scroll down to my propellers. And here's each one of my propellers. Okay. Now I want to animate each one of these. So I'm going to click on number 1. Sure, we'll start there. Go to my animation wizard, and it's going to say, what do you want to rotate? This is why it's kind of weird because I'm just used to punching in values. I want to animate the rotation of the item. Yep, that's what the rotation is. And that's going to say, which item do you want to rotate? And then I have to go into my list and find propeller. I guess I'll do 2 first because it's the first one. And then how much do you want to rotate it? Okay, so I'm not setting a start point and an end point. I'm saying how much do I want this thing to rotate in the timeline that we have. So I believe I used 12,000, okay? This thing has to spin pretty quick in order for us to get some good motion blur on it. So 12,000, which axis? Typically the y-axis is the one going up and down, so that would be the one that would spin it around like that. Where is my axis orientation? Original local is fine. Where is my pivot? It's at the center. And then what kind of motion ease do you want? I don't want it to just like go. I want to gradually pick up speed and then go faster. So if I go down to easy ease, that's what it should be doing. Gradually pick up speed and start spinning. Okay, so I click on that. And then we hit duration is 5 seconds. What? There we go. And then I hit finish. Okay, so now I have an animation for that one. So let me just set that off to the side. So now if I, because I can't because I need this. If I click and drag here, you can see that one spinning. Okay. So as I click and drag this, you can see that that blade is now spinning around. Okay, and if I hit the play button, you'll see how it gradually picks up speed and then it's going to go crazy. Now in 5 seconds spinning 12,000, it's going to go very quick, very fast, which is what they should do. And then it lifts off the ground too because we have that animation already baked in. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now I need to copy this animation to the other ones. So all I have to do is to go to, I can do copy, but what I like to do, because it's kind of easier, is just hold down Alt and drag it onto each one of these. So that puts it in there. That puts it in there. And that puts it in there. So now when we hit play, they all start spinning. Okay? Now one thing I want to correct. It looks like they're already doing it. I was expecting them to be spinning a different way. Like when I showed this yesterday, it was different. Whatever. I want them to spin opposite, right? So I don't want them all to be spinning in the exact same direction. It appears that they are spinning in different directions already. Okay, so they're like these two on the far left are spinning opposite, and then those other two are spinning opposite too, so it's perfect. If I needed to change any of this, all I have to do is go into each one. You can see the little gear right here. There's the animation. So all I have to do is, or I can just do it right here. Click on any one of these, and I can just make this negative. And now it'll spin opposite direction from where it was going. So it looks like it's good. I'll just leave it at 12,000. I can also pick a direction, so if I decide to go a Z for some weird reason, you can see how this back one is like going crazy. There we go, now we're good. Alright, cool, cool, cool. Alright. So we'll close that, close that, close that. We'll save our scene. It wants to save it into Keyshots folder. Make sure you save it into your folder. Web 10, work, drone, scenes, drone demo. There we go. Okay, so that's that. Now, all of the stuff up here we can edit. So I can go into my environment, and I can edit the contrast of the environment, which will edit what the rendering looks like. So if I take the contrast down, it takes the contrast of this down. I crank the contrast up, you'll see how I get a much more contrasted rendering. Okay. Now the way this works is it's loading in what's called an HDR. Okay, an HDR is essentially a 360 by 360 image. So it's literally like that image there. If I put it onto a sphere, it would be this environment. Okay, and the way you take them is you go into a room with a camera and you do like a panoramic this way, and then you tilt your camera up and do it again all the way around, and you tilt it down and do it again all the way around. And that is the 360 that you'll get. Now you take that one that you've done and you do several more. So one you'll do like at a medium balance of lighting and coloring and whatever. One you'll do dark, one you'll do light, and then it mashes all these together. That's what an HDRI is. So there's lots of information inside here. We could also play around with the rotation of it. So if we wanted to rotate the lighting around in the scene, we could rotate it and maybe get like a little different highlight on the propeller there. We can change the size. We can change the brightness, whatever. You get the idea. It's awesome because it's just a slider. You slide it and you'll see exactly what it does. Change the color. Instead of having a lighting environment, I could pick a color here and now it's just white. Okay, I typically like to have the lighting environment for this. Here's my camera, so I could adjust my camera settings, change my focal length, flattening it out, more distortion to it. I could add a ground grid, not that I want to do that, except to kind of look at this and see that my drone is actually kind of like in the middle. He's not on the ground, he's like halfway through the ground. I'm going to go back to my scene, grab my drone, go to its position and say snap to ground, and now he's actually on the ground. Back to my camera, turn off the ground grid. A couple of the new cool things, depth of field. So I can turn on depth of field. Let's get kind of close to this. Tell it that I want this point right here to be in focus. And then what it should be doing is blurring out the rest of this image. Just got to play with the f-stop a bit. There it goes. So now this first part right here, crystal clearish, and then back there we're getting more depth of field. Depth of field makes these items feel more realistic. It feels like it's actually taken with a realistic camera. Pull it down a little bit more maybe. And then easy pie, just like click a different spot, hit done. There we go. that spot. Done. Really awesome. You could also do these kind of blooming effects. Come on. And make it bigger. There it goes. So now we're getting this kind of like little halo glow around our highlights. We can also do like some vignetting. Now that's impressive enough. Now look over here at these other ones. These are default colors, so you could load in different color schemes that you want to play with and pick from there. The environments one is kind of neat. So on my example, where'd he go? There he is. On my example here, this is like a warehouse. So inside of the interiors, one of these, I think it's this one, I just drag it. That's all I have to do. Drag it, and then rotate around, and now he's in a warehouse. And then I could, of course, affect my focus point. And maybe adjust my f-stop some too. There we go. I'm actually going to turn it off for this. Anything you do like that is just going to take longer to render. Alright, so that's cool there. So now what we want to do for the animation part is just kind of set this up into where we want this to be located. So I'm going to maybe set it up here. Make sure that I don't go out of frame. There you go, that's good. Just comes up a little bit, that's all we need. And then I'm going to go to my settings, and what I need to do is set this to something I'm going to render out. Okay, so this is like where you're setting up your framing inside of Maya. The default size here is like random. Based on your monitor resolution, it just picks a setting. If I try to type in 960 by 540, it's not going to let me. And this is like a glitch inside the software. It doesn't let me change my resolution because it's basically this viewport is locked to that size. So if I drag this off so it's a floating window, then I can type in 960 by 540 just so we can resize it. It's a ridiculous thing, whatever. But then I can go in here and say lock the aspect ratio, lock the resolution. So now it's actually locked to those settings. All right. So then I'm going to go to my render button here, or my settings button, and I could turn stuff on. So all we've seen so far is self shadow. That means that this item is going to drop shadows on things. I could also turn on global illumination, meaning that the light will hit our object and then kind of bounce around a little bit. So if you look at this here, look how dark that is. And as we turn that on, it lightens it up a bit because the light's kind of bouncing around. We can also add ground illumination, which will kind of bounce some of the light up here. Not really doing much for this scene. I can also turn on motion blur. Obviously, that one should do a lot, right? Because we have those blades spinning. Now, just like when we first looked at this and it was really grainy and it gets smoother and smoother and smoother, the motion blur is going to do the same thing. So initially, you couldn't see anything there. But now, as it renders and renders and renders, it smooth out those blades. Cool. All right. So now we can go to render, and now we can go to the render button. And this is where we set our stuff up. So like I said, you're going to turn in two things. One is going to be a still image. Okay. So when you have a position set up for this, let me just scoot that over. You're like, this looks like a cool shot. I want that shot in there. Okay. Then you can come in here and render out that shot. Now for the resolution for that, we want something big. So just making sure it's letting me do it. There we go. So a 10 by 5 perfect size. Then I would just hit render and it would go into this folder here and it would be called that. So obviously I want to put this in the right folder. P drive. Sarcona. 2510. Work. Drone. Images. There we go. And then Sarcona drone demo. And then I like to save all of these as EXRs or TIFF32s. Anything that's bigger than that's higher than a JPEG, like a TIFF32 or an EXR, it saves more data to it, so you have more editing ability once you get inside of Photoshop. So even a PSD 32-bit you could save as well. EXR is one I would typically go to, so I'm just going to save it as an EXR. Oops. I have to go to quality. I have to turn this to a maximum sample. Turn that to 128. Everything else should be good. Okay, hit render, and there it goes. So it's going to go through and it's going to render out that one image just like that, and then save it into that folder when it's done. This one image is going to take some time. It's using all 8 cores, so all 8 processors that are in the station. I have no idea what the 2.4 and 0.6 and 0.8, probably like what it's doing at that time, or just something that looks fancy. But it's at 7% done. So it's going to take some time to render this. So I'm just going to hit escape, hit stop. There we go. Where'd you go, Keyshot? There you are. So we want to do an animation on this. So for the animation, we're doing the 960 by 540, perfect size. And we're outputting our frames from 1 to 120. We're doing a frame output. And again, we have to pick the folder we want it to go into. My images folder is perfect. I want these to be EXRs. Here's the name here. Now, the name is like this, and then there's a .%D. That means number, okay? Don't touch the .%D. Leave that alone. That means that it's going to do name.number.extension when it renders out. All right, that's it. Animation, frame output, that, render. Do I want to overwrite? Sure. And so now it's just going to go to frame number 1, render out frame 1. Go to 2, render out 2. I'm going to stop this again because I also realized that I was still zoomed in. There we go. So obviously I want to zoom back out to where I can see the entire drone, where it's at, and then render it again. Now you can also lock your camera. So if, let's say, you render your stuff out, it gets halfway through, you come back in next time, and your camera isn't locked, and you do that, you have to restart your render from the beginning because now your camera's been moved. Okay? So get your camera positioned where you want it to be, lock the camera. You could also add a new camera if you want to view something from somewhere else. All right, so then I would just go to render, animation render, yes. There we go. So now it's just going to go through and it's going to render out every single frame. You take those frames, put it in After Effects, make it into a movie. Nothing else fancier, okay? Just like we did on the Batman Gotham thing. All right, we don't have to do any background stuff, just literally whatever we get out, bring in After Effects and make it into a QuickTime. Yes, ma'am.
I need help with something that's with my drawing.
All right, we got to wait then.
I know.
So that's it. So that's where we're going to be doing this. When you are turning your stuff in, you're going to be turning in your Maya folder, just like we did before. So you turn in your images. I don't need all the images in there, just your last image and your movie. You'll turn in your scenes folder, and you'll turn in your source images folder. Okay? And then these are going to be due, I'll save that, on the 12th. Okay, so a week from today, we'll be getting those in. Now once you have it modeled, you can see how quickly that last process goes. This video was only an hour long, and I repeated myself and stepped through it, you know. It shouldn't take terribly too long. Once you understand the concept of Keyshot, it's incredibly easy. It's just a matter of where stuff is located. Okay? So I'll